Welcome to the preview webinar for Product Management Studio. This is a sort of a preview that we have for a larger program that we offer through Berkeley Executive Education called Product Management Studio. And it is an online product management certificate program, primarily designed and led by Dr. Sara Beckman, whom has been sort of chatting y'all up just now. I myself act as the program director for the program, which also my affiliation with the university is as a faculty member. So I teach a few different product management courses at the Haas School of Business as well. And Sarah has been teaching there for longer. So I myself have a background in product management. I have been working in product management for a little bit over a decade and a half now, having led quite a few teams in a few various industries. Happy to share a little bit more about that before or at the end, if anybody has any questions. But throughout this session, we are, after my little introduction here, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, who is going to run a few questions through you all. Around why product management matters, and also really dig into the 4 core questions that we believe every product manager needs to be able to answer on behalf of their customers and their product. That 4 core questions framework is in fact the scaffolding that we use as a way of really digging into the overall product management studio program that spans 8 weeks. Past that point, we'll actually talk a little bit about the program. So if you find this session interesting, feel definitely stick around towards the end there, and we'll share a little bit more about what the product management studio program looks like and whether you might be interested or not. And then we'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A as well. Now, while we're going through this entire session, you should feel very free to share any questions you might have in chat. We will keep track of them. And in some cases, if it's appropriate, we'll try to bring it to the session and have the questions answered live by either myself or Sarah. Otherwise, we will log them and store them and try to get back to you about them later on the session. And so we've got a team here, program manager, Jennifer Bui, as well as our marketing manager here, Ali, are both here to help us facilitate through the entire session. So certainly don't be shy about popping in questions into chat. Now, with that said, though, as you do share information here and there, please, we want to create a safe and open and inclusive environment so that people feel okay and comfortable sharing. And so be mindful of how you engage with the entire session. And if you do run into any technical issues at any point in time, please feel very free to message any one of us on the panel, and we will try our best to help you resolve those problems as best as we can. So one quick note from before, this session is actually being recorded as well. So we will be sharing the recording through the email that you had signed up on this webinar with. So with that, I'm going to do a quick intro of Sarah, Dr. Sara Beckman here. Is a longtime faculty member at the Haas School of Business, as well as at the College of Engineering, having earned her bachelor's, master's, and PhD in industrial engineering and engineering management at Stanford, no less. So for those who don't know, Stanford and Berkeley are rivals in the Bay Area. That said, though, her experiences in industrial engineering has helped her through some great professional experiences, both at Hewlett-Packard and Booz Allen Hamilton, as you see here on the slide. And from those experiences of doing industrial engineering and manufacturing, she recognized that a lot of the problems within the industrial engineering world actually start upstream in the design process, and has been studying, researching, and teaching about design processes way before design thinking was cool. So at this point, Sarah serves as a faculty director for various product management programs at Haas. The longest running one hasn't having been around for, I think, 14, 15 years now. I lose track, Sarah. And really teaching product management probably way in advance of most people knowing what product management is. Beyond that, I also want to sort of recognize Sara's work in being the Chief Learning Officer at the Design Innovation Institute on campus here at UC Berkeley, and also the recipient of a couple of not just engineering school or business school, but UC Berkeley campus-wide awards in teaching as well as mentorship. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sara. Enjoy.
Thank you, Vince. And welcome, everyone. Great to at least see all your names here, and hopefully I'll get to see your faces in a future interaction. So I'm going to dive in. I want to start by getting to know all of you just a little bit. We have a poll for you to take because we'd like to understand how many of you come to this conversation as experienced product managers, how many of you are new at this job or are wanting to do this job or interface with people who do this job. So give you a second to chime in here and let us know. Perhaps those of you who are others could let us know in the chat. Notice that you have a choice of addressing all panelists and all attendees. It's nice if you answer all panelists and attendees. That will allow the entire group to know what you're up to. So it looks like we have a pretty balanced representation today, Vince. We've got roughly a third each of experienced product managers, new product managers, and aspiring product managers. And then, well, the remaining, maybe a quarter each of those, and then a quarter of you work with product managers or your others. I'd love to hear from the others in the chat about what other is. So we, in this program, we tend to have people at all of these levels in most of the programs that we run. We separate you out when we create the peer coach groups that we have in the program. So you would be working in your smaller groups with people have similar levels of experience, but in the broader groups, you would be interacting with the broader group. So great to have that kind of representation here. Maybe I didn't share those results with you. Now you can see them. And Jeff, great, yeah, portfolio management as a broader role. Great. So I want to start out by asking you, since a lot of you are in the product management space, as Vince said, we've been running product management programs at Berkeley for 14 years or so now. And it's become a more and more important role over that time. It's taken on more definition, more and more companies have started product management functions or tried to further develop those functions. So I'm curious what you think the reason is that product management has become such an important role. So if you throw into chat your thoughts about what has made product management a critical role for companies to develop and over the years. So Jamie, voice of the customer, Jania says, software is eating the world. So I'm curious, what does software is eating the world have to do with product managers? So I think maybe to sort of Jamie and Jennifer suggesting that product managers are becoming the customer advocate. I wonder why customers need advocates more than they ever did. Certainly it's determining the center of the experiences you want to launch, right? Sunita. And Reg, what are the implications of this rapid change of technology? Consumers are getting more sophisticated, there's more competition. Certainly PMs can help be the basis for client relationships. Important, Sangeeta, right, is that it's a cross-functional role that thinks through the customer problems, but it brings together those people across the organization. Jessica, we're putting the customer first. Somebody has to be the glue that connects the sides of the business. Huge upfront investments, so I'd like a little risk management to be able to look at what's going on with those investments. PMs become certainly owners for the business success of their products, right? They want to make products that are best for customers, digitizing, helping define strategy. So lots of material here about what PMs do, a little bit about why that matters to the organization, particularly this increase in customer focus, right? So an intimate management role, I like that, an intimate management role for specific products. So lots of stuff in the chat about the roles that PMs play. I want to take a little bit of a step back here and sort of ask what's going on in the world today that's causing us to really need PMs more than even 14 years ago. And I don't know if there are any jazz piano fans out there who know who Keith Jarrett is, but there's a great story. You can listen to this on the Cautionary Tales podcast, Bowie Jazz and the Unplayable Piano. But Keith Jarrett was invited by a young 16-year-old girl to come play in Cologne, Germany. This is back in the 1980s. And when he arrived, he was an up-and-coming improvisational jazz pianist at the time. When he arrived, the piano that he had asked for was there, but it was kind of a mess. It wasn't working. And he said he wasn't going to play, and this poor young woman who had gone to great effort to get him there and get the opera house signed up for it, begged and begged for him to stay. They got a piano tuner to do what he could with the piano. And ultimately, he played this piano, which is as described here. The keys were sticking, the pedals didn't work, the felt was all worn away. And fortunately, they recorded it because it became his most famous piece, the Cologne concert. And so I like to use this as a metaphor for what we've been through in the last year plus now, that we've really been handed an unplayable piano in a lot of ways, and we've had to learn to improvise. And I would argue that product managers are at the heart of that improvisation process. Now that implies that we have much deeper understanding of customer and user experiences than we have before. Now, this trajectory was on its way because of the rapid change in technology. So a couple of you pointed out technological change. Technological change is allowing us to create all these new experiences, and COVID has pushed us off the cliff, if you will, to say, you got to figure out what these experiences will look like now. I particularly loved this picture of this Uber driver who is trying real time to adjust customer experiences so that he can maintain his business. And so what we're faced with, and we were faced with this before COVID, but again, it has rapidly accelerated the change that we're going through. It's forcing us to really think about how we design the systems in which we're all going to live and work, and Vince and I would add learn to that list. So I have a question for you. What are all the implications of autonomous vehicles? What kind of changes can we expect as a result of the deployment of autonomous vehicles? What will change in our lives ultimately? So more lives saved, Andre. There's safety. Actually, I had somebody once say to me in class that we'll have fewer accidents, but then we'll have fewer organ donations. So it'll be interesting to see if we save lives. Certainly increase productivity, right, Hassan? I can do something else instead of focusing on driving my car. What will happen to insurance? Do we insure the drivers? Do we insure the cars? Do we insure the company that owns the cars? Jessica, certainly there's going to be, people aren't going to be driving for a living anymore, so they're going to have to find something else to do. Interesting, Claire, that this will propagate continued growth in machine learning. So being able to deploy these things in vehicles may cause us to understand how to use them elsewhere. Yeah, I was hoping, Susmita, that we would have self-driving cars before my sons had to get their driver's licenses. I thought that might make life all that much safer for all of us. Congestion comes up, which really is related to notions of less revenue for parking tickets. If I don't own cars, which I haven't seen show up here yet, but if I don't own cars, which is very possibly a part of this this transformation, then I don't have to park them, and then I have a lot more space that I can build into other things. So all the parklets that have arisen that are using parking spaces in places like San Francisco right now could become more permanent if we have a completely different infrastructure. Certainly, Jessica, very interesting, this notion of security concerns where hackers can hack cars and use them as weapons in effect, certainly is being talked about on the Berkeley campus among folks that are in that space. Yeah, Jeff, we'll get this notion of vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity, which then raises, do I need stop signs? How do I manage intersections? All kinds of ways that make change, to say nothing of transformation in other spaces. So let me give you one more example. There are some people who do research on longevity who are saying that the first person to reach 150 is already alive today, and within 2 decades will enable people to live to be 1,000 years old. So it's not unbelievable. Like somebody just died who was 115. That we might, somebody, well, Vince's 4-month-old might live to be 150. So certainly somebody that's believable. People kind of groan often when they imagine living to be 1,000. So back it off to even 200. What changes if people start living to be 200 years old? Pension plans, yeah, or lack thereof. Certainly overpopulation. How are we going to support people? Yeah, so what do support systems look like? And actually, because the bigger question is, what does aging look like? And the image here, you see somebody with a number of prosthetics, right? Artificial limbs. So yeah, Jeff, absolutely. This is the question: do you marry for life? Do you have a kid every 2 years or every 20 years? Midlife crises. Do I retire at 65? So all kinds of fundamental social structures get called into question. Mansoor, I'd be interested to know more about what the within culture clashes means. Certainly, Hassan will be developing knowledge as we go along, because part of the way that we'll extend life is to develop the medical knowledge. But certainly that will open up all kinds of other sciences. Yeah, Sunita. Yeah, maybe it just becomes the norm that you have a new spouse every X number of years. I won't put a number on X just in case my husband is listening here. But yeah, long time to spend with one person, 180 years. We've been married 180 years. So absolutely pressure and resources, all of those things. So here's the point I want to make with this is that we've historically pushed products out the door. And now those products have significant implications in the world. And so increasingly, product managers are core players, the key players, the central players in designing systems of the future that somehow take into account both technology and people. So we're already talking a lot about designing experiences for people, which is a more systemic view of what it is that we're putting out there. people talk about going beyond designing experiences to being able to guide transformations, help people go through transformations from one state of being to another. So this notion is the notion that a product is not the core thing. We should probably call you not product managers, but experience managers, because it's really that purview. Exactly, you're designing lifestyles ultimately. So it goes well beyond the product itself. And so as we begin to think at that level, we have to give product managers different sets of tools. And you can take all kinds of examples out there. You know, Google happens to be pretty good at systems level thinking in many ways. Facebook is certainly confronting the challenges of the significant systemic impacts of its social media platforms. Mansoor, yeah, generation gap. We have enough trouble with that today. And if you've got 100 years between generations, not between generations, but between people, it's a huge difference. So, any Black Mirror fans out there? They do, Maria. That product management is used in any industry. I've been doing a lot of work lately with some large infrastructure companies in the oil and gas industry, for example, and there's a significant need in some of those spaces to be taking this kind of systems view. So a lot of these companies have historically been very technology focused or very what we call product centric, and shifting away to for example, with digital transformation in these highly technologically based industries, shifting away from that technology-centric view to a development of new experiences and of new systems in which people work is really critical. So, so what fans? So Black Mirror is for those of you who don't, there is a recording, Hema. There will be a recording available afterwards. Good, Jen's already answered. So Black Mirror is a dystopian view of the future with technology in it. And for me, I can only digest one episode here and there because some of them are quite dark and cause you to really have to think about things. But the episode pictured here is one in which everyone rates everyone else after every interaction, and then those ratings get used to put your to decide like what rental car line you get in it. Sadly, the future has rental car lines, but that's another conversation. So, so this is really the question we're posing in part in this class, is to say, what is the role of product managers in thinking about those alternative futures that we're creating, which really puts customer experience design at the heart of what we're talking about. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of the frameworks that we use in the product management program. And the first one is what we call the product management canvas. If you've used the business model canvas, this is our version of how to think about those elements. And we place them into 4 questions that every product manager needs to be able to answer. The first of those questions, and for me, the anchor, is what value is my organization providing for whom? And so here I'm identifying what are the customer segments I'm providing value for, and then what is the value I'm providing to each of those segments. Another way to think about value prop is what outcomes am I aiming to help each customer segment achieve? I could think in terms of functional, social, and emotional jobs to be done. I could think of the benefits that I'm providing to customers. So there are multiple ways that we talk about framing a value proposition. So in the class, we spend some amount of time on segmentation, targeting, and positioning, which is what helps you get to the answers to these customer segmentation and value prop questions. And so then the second question that comes out of knowing what value you're providing for whom is, how is my organization actually creating that value? And you could think of this box a little bit as what we've historically called core competences, but it has to do with the make-buy decision. It has to do with what activities do we have to do in order to literally build or create the value that we're offering in our value proposition. And there may be some things that we don't want to invest in or do ourselves, and so we outsource those to key partners. So this central box is really about understanding what the organization is good at, understanding how to leverage that into alternative value propositions, and conversely, understanding that in order to create a particular set of value, I need to invest in certain value creation activities. The third core question then becomes, now that I've built that value, how do I get it into my customers' hands? And this box is largely about channel strategy. So there are 5 functions of channels: raising awareness of a product, helping customers evaluate a product, facilitating purchase of the product, delivering the product, and providing post-purchase consumer support for it. So product I use here in a very broad sense. One of these days, I'm going to replace the word product in this program with experience. But the idea is that you're generating an experience for the customer, and you have to have them become aware, be able to evaluate, purchase, implement, and support that experience. And then the final question is, given that I've got all of that in place in order to get this value into my customers' hands, how am I capturing the value? And this has to do with identifying what types of revenue sources you want to use. And then, of course, revenue less cost. And the costs are all driven largely by that center box in the top. So all the investment I'm making to create value determines my cost structure. And so revenue versus cost gives you profitability. Some of you may be working on internal products, in which case you may not have a direct revenue stream, although I would argue that somebody's paying your paycheck. So there's a revenue stream from corporate to pay you. But the other way to think about revenue stream is the stream of benefits that you're providing to your customers. So I want to walk through a quick example with you. I suspect most of you know what Slack is. Slack is a basically coordination, collaboration app that helps you work better together, right? So I'm going to walk you through the product management canvas, starting with the first box. So who are Slack's customers, or who are the segments they're serving? And for each of those segments that you identify, what value is Slack providing? So who are Slack's customers? Enterprises, corporates, businesses, people in a corporate environment, could also be nonprofits, virtual teams, all businesses, which is not a very good segmentation scheme, but we'll talk about that in the class. Startups, humans, that's also a little broad, but it's a particular kind of humans, right? It can be used, as Jeff says, in academic institutions, universities. Yeah, anyone and all can use Slack, but they don't sell to everyone, right? So they're selling to particular types of people. Nice. So Susmita and Sunita, anyone wanting to do collaboration, right? Anyone with access to smartphones. So now you're beginning to narrow the segments a little bit. And what value is Slack providing to enterprises? Collaboration. Audio conversations is kind of a feature. So I want to know what value audio conversations. So I can do efficient communication. I can collaborate. I have better and faster collaboration. I have real-time asynchronous collaboration, better access to knowledge, reduced overhead that's associated with email, more transparency in communications. Nice. So searchability, better access or retrieval of things that are going on. So the best I could tell when I was looking Slack up online, they distinguish two segments, and that's startup companies. And they say that the value prop to startup companies is that they save time by removing communication silos, and large corporations are another target market. And there they're talking about some level of compliance or standardization or management in the coordination of thousands of workers. Certainly, they're selling to, well, not really to individuals because they're always used by teams, but it could be standalone teams as well. But that doesn't appear to be a core target market for them, at least when you look it up. I could be wrong, so you could correct me on that. But so given they have these two customer segments, what literally does Slack do? So the CEO of Slack, right, they've been bought, so, but takes money out of the pocket, out of this, to spend on some activities and resources. What are those key activities that Slack engages in order to create the value that you've listed here? So they have to build a platform. They have R&D and marketing. Okay, they have people who are writing code. They have people who are figuring out how to communicate what they have to provide. And Lucas, they do integration with other apps as well. So you could say those become partnerships in the Slack environment. Okay, so now in this case, most of the stuff they do in this box, you'll notice that I have a blue customer segment and a gold customer segment. I've gone over to the Go Bears side, so I live blue and gold now instead of cardinal red. So I put in gray these activities because for the most part, the investment that they're making is used across both segments. And that's very common, that we would choose to leverage that investment as much as we can across multiple different segments. And then you've listed some of these. They have connections or partnerships with a whole bunch of people in order to augment the functionality of Slack. So tell me what channels they use to enable customer awareness, evaluation, purchase, delivery, and support. How do they connect with both startup companies and large corporations? Certainly social media, mobile, web, conferences, Andre. So they might attend conferences where they see their, what kind of partners, Luke? They use a chat room, ads, that you can contact IT. So you're naming a bunch of things. You're naming things that cut across the awareness, evaluation, purchase, delivery, support, right? So some of these things like contacting IT, I'm not sure actually which direction you meant that answer, but there was somebody who brought up something that had to do with support somewhere here. So there's stuff that has to do with support that might be a totally different channel than ads, events, and conferences and social media. That word of mouth would all be more of the awareness and evaluation end of the spectrum. Now, this is a case where some amount of what you listed probably is serving both target customers, whereas they might have more, for example, direct sales or that conference attendance. Those might be more targeted at interacting with larger corporations. So often we see that the differentiation of the value provided to two different segments often happens in the structure of the channels that I'm using to interact with those customers. Whereas sometimes the platform itself might be used across both of the both of the channels. And so how do customers pay? What kind of a revenue structure does Slack have? Per user, subscription, and freemium, right? So that's why I know that's what we use in the academic setting is the freemium model for the student teams that are working on this. What I thought was really fun about how they presented some of this when you look Slack up is that they link directly to the benefits that they're providing to their customers. So for example, they'll talk about 21% faster response time to sales leads. So being very concrete about the benefits. And what we talk about in this class is pricing to value. So we talk about how you understand the value you're providing. That's what's in that value prop statement. And then how you use revenue models that allow you to charge up to that value level. So I love this quote. I don't sell features, messaging, or channels. I sell organizational transformation. So this is a value prop at a meta level, and not getting down to the features and functionality, but much more the opportunity that exists for an organization. So freemium, pay per active user, and then of course the costs here are largely salaries and office space use. So that's the core model that we use in the class. We spend a fair amount of time on that upfront question. How do you learn about your customers through both qualitative and quantitative methods? We talk about how you do segmentation, targeting, and ultimately positioning or designing a value proposition. Then we talk briefly about identifying those core competencies, those core activities and resources that you're using to create value, and about channel strategy. And then we have a session on pricing. We know that some number of product managers are not directly involved in pricing, but it's important to understand how the organization does price, and ultimately the product manager should be the person who's very clear about what value is being provided to the customer, and that should be an underpinning of making those pricing decisions. This is, Mark, if you want to take the 9 boxes on the business model canvas, you would have customer segments on the right and value prop in the center. Then the customer relationships and channels would be the delivering value. Key activities, resources, and partnerships is the center. And then the bottom box is revenue and cost. We've just tried to capture it in the 4 questions that a product manager should be able to answer. So we create a different sort of sense of the dynamics of how these boxes fit together. To me, the business model canvas is more useful if you think about the connections among those boxes instead of just what's in the boxes. So it's in effect a revision of those elements. Yes, Mark, correct. Anmar, yes, this applies to services as well. There are very few companies now that are not in the service business. So the question is, how do you segment the users of your services? Good question, Jennifer. I'll get to that in a second. What value prop are you providing? How do you actually build that value? In services, it tends to be, it depends on the service. It tends to be more labor intensive, although there are services that surround technologies. You still have to think about channels. You have to figure out how to price the services. Jennifer, here's the answer to your question. It's a good question. So I could build a business model or a product management canvas at the level of an entire company. I could build it at the level of a division. I could build it at the level of the product. All of those nest inside one another. So you can take this really meta, or you can take it down to the level. becomes a little less interesting if you get all the way down to the feature level, because features rarely provide value to the customer independent of the rest of the stuff that they sit in. Capturing value, Amy, is revenue model, whereas creating value is literally building it. So I hire a bunch of coders to write code to build my platform, and then I charge, that's creating value. And then I charge you a subscription fee to capture the value. So that's the difference between those. We do address internal products. And Shanmugam, you'll have to tell me more about what you think the technical aspects of product management are. So the second framework that we put around this product management canvas is a storytelling framework. And the storytelling framework allows me to bring alive the product management canvas in a more emotionally connecting way. And so fundamentally, I want to say, once upon a time, there was a customer who really wanted to achieve this outcome and couldn't do so because something stood in the way of their being able to do that. And then they heard about, through my channels, my product, which offered this value proposition, thus resolving that conflict and allowing the customer to achieve their outcome. It works in the following ways, unlike the other ways that the customer could solve the problem. So it's a way of helping you as a product manager have an elevator pitch that you can take up the chain to get funding for your product. It's also a way for you to get a shared understanding on your product team of what it is you're doing for whom. So we'll put this storytelling wrapper around the business model that's represented by the product management canvas. And then we'll leverage the development of what we call these innovation capabilities in order to help you better understand your customer, have empathy for them, generate insights from that understanding that lead you to new frames of how you could structure a value prop, then generate alternative futures or solutions for your customers, and then ultimately play with those, whether that's through prototyping or other forms of testing. And then we spend some time on mobilizing and executing. How do you facilitate a team to be able to execute against the stuff you've designed? Tyler, in the long run, yes, I think you do need to understand how these things connect across the organization. The place where it wouldn't be aligned is if you're in two different divisions in a company and those divisions are more or less standalone. So then the corporate level of alignment might not matter as much. So a place like Google, where you've got Waymo and search, there might not be a lot of needed alignment at the corporate level because you could do sufficient work at the layer below that. Emily, they are a little bit different. Ideally, they would be consistent with how UX represents customer experiences, but often UX designers are at a more micro level in describing specific user stories, as opposed to this broader notion of really the product positioning and the value prop of the solution. During customer empathy, we'll talk about both qualitative and quantitative methods. Qualitative methods being things like customer interviews and observations, quantitative methods being more market research and data analytics approaches. And we'll talk about what is the most efficient to use at what time. We'll also talk about the value of personas and the things you have to be careful with in using personas. Right now, I want to, these are great questions, so keep asking questions, but I want to give Vince a chance to give you an overview of the logistics of the program, how it works, and then we'll keep on answering questions in the chat. So Vince.
Yep. Great. Thank you for all of that, Sarah. So everybody, you have just really received a very representative slice of what the Product Management Studio program offered by Berkeley Executive Education looks like. So we try to make the program as interactive as possible, and all of your engagement so far is very much within the scope of how we designed the program. In fact, through the more official live sessions within the program, it wouldn't just be with chat, because these webinars are constrained to only chat, but in the live sessions, we'll actually be able to see you, people will be able to unmute and speak up, and we try to get and generate a conversation to the best of our ability. But this hopefully gives you a sense that this online program is not simply just a place for you to watch videos and do homework on your own. Of course, there will be recorded videos, and absolutely there will be assignments, but we try to make those things as concrete and as engaging as possible through the use of community, being able to have you share with different people within the program your perspective on a particular component of the project management canvas, for example. We also ask you to do assignments, not just for the sake of doing assignments. We ask you to apply a lot of the frameworks and ideas that you've just learned into your day-to-day work. So over the 8 weeks of the program, in between the new content being released the next week and next week, we're asking you to actually apply some of that learning into your day job, which hopefully will make the learning stick a little bit better. And on top of that, we also have a team of coaches who will be supporting you through the entire journey, since there's only a handful of faculty members and often some 100 people within a program or an iteration. We also bring in coaches who are professional product managers, and I'll be speaking about the coaches in a second. So Sarah, next slide, please. Well, so I mentioned that the program is 8 weeks long. And technically, it's actually 10 calendar weeks, because we start with week 0, where that is the opportunity for everyone to jump onto the platform, introduce themselves, meet some of the people that are in the program, but also get used to all the different components of the program. There's going to be a digital platform online. There's going to be a Zoom that we use for live sessions. There's going to be tools that we use for assignments. All of these things are part of week 0. And then we kick off with week 1, which is going to cover a little bit of the introductory materials around the product management canvas and the innovation capabilities, but also get a little bit deeper and ask you to actually build a product management canvas on your own and share it with your coaches as well for feedback. Week 2, we start to talk about that storytelling wrapper that Sarah just mentioned that helps you really articulate the value through your customer's perspective. And then from weeks 3 through 6, we go deep dive into each of the 4 core questions, with really thinking through who your customer segments are, what the value propositions might be, how do you and your team actually create and deliver value. And then subsequently in week 6, we talk extensively about pricing, which is how do you capture value? How do you make sure that you price your product correctly? After 6 weeks, we do give folks a break. And that is an opportunity for folks to catch up if they feel like they're falling a little bit behind in the program. And then we start to wrap up the program with some great content around stakeholder management, team management, mobilizing and executing, and then finishing the program with a storytelling revisit, where you get to go back after having gone through each of the components and retell your story, hopefully in a much more illuminative way, much more customer-centric way. So all of those components are going to be part of the program across 8 content weeks, but 10 calendar weeks. So you might ask yourself, well, that looks like a lot of work, and it's not trivial by any means. We expect that most of the folks that join us in our program are fully employed as well. So we try to make and balance the content as best as we can. We roughly estimate that each week is going to be about 5 hours of content and work, and that's a mix between videos and reading and assignments and discussions, which you can do on your own. But there's also these live sessions on Zoom that's either going to be synchronous with the entire 100 to 150 people in the cohort. There's actually 2 time options, morning and an evening time option for the US West Coast, which means that if you are joining from APAC, or if you're joining from Europe or the Middle East or Africa, there's should always be a time that works for you. Now, those live sessions can be quite large, so they're great for discussions, they're great for Q&A, they're great for interacting with faculty members, but those live sessions don't happen every week. Every other week or so, they are also going to be supplemented by coach and team sessions. So each participant will be assigned a coach, and each coach will roughly have 10 members on their team. And these are opportunities for smaller groups to interact with each other in a more hands-on way, where you get to share your work more explicitly with a small group and get feedback from your peers as well. So between those two interactions, working on your own and these live sessions, we expect about 5 hours per week. Now, I wanted to also share that Sarah and myself are not the only faculty members that will be sharing our experiences with you all. Starting from the upper left, next to Sarah, we've got David Reamer, who is a storytelling expert. He is going to really dig into the storytelling component, having recently actually written and published a book around storytelling, and have created the Innovation Story Board. Next to David, we've got Keela Robeson, who is a senior vice president of a product at Netflix, who will be sharing her experiences having managed a lot of different product management teams. Next to her, we've got David Mock, who is a pricing expert, having worked in B2B and consumer hardware, as well as biotechnology, some areas that are very, very difficult to price. Then we've got the bottom row here, starting with David Sharon, who is a resident entrepreneurship and innovation expert at the House School of Business, sharing his perspectives about channels and relationships with customers. Center bottom, we've got Stephen Huff, who is a marketing expert and a visiting faculty member in the executive MBA program, talking about segmentation, targeting, positioning, and other various data-driven methods in marketing. And then I myself will be sharing my experiences in things like metrics, road mapping, prioritization, and the likes. So I mentioned that there would be coaches. These are experienced PMs who typically hail from relatively large tech companies, but in some cases, they're coming from various different industries as well. They will be leading teams of up to 10 participants and providing regular weekly feedback to all the folks who are working on their assignments. At the end of the program, we also offer one-on-one coaching opportunities so that you have some time with your coaches to speak about anything that you might like, whether it be details about the content, some clarifications that you need within the program, or even get their advice on perhaps a career move that you'd like to make. Now, we do source coaches from all industries, as you can see here represented by some of these logos, and we try our best to make sure that participants, teams, and coaches are as well matched as possible in terms of the industries. And for some of y'all who might have had some time to spend on the Berkeley Executive Education website, you might have found that this online product management studio program is different from the in-person product management program. There are, for the most part, the content is quite similar, with the exception of the fact that within the in-person program, there's some opportunities to do negotiation exercises in person with each other, and a little bit more depth in some of the things like marketing and storytelling. That said, the online program is a little bit more friendly for folks who are perhaps coming from a lot of different places and not able to join us on the UC Berkeley campus. And it's a little bit more flexible in that you're sort of working for the content over 8 weeks part-time, as opposed to 5 full consecutive days. So the online program, as with a lot of the different online education, does allow you to apply some of the concepts throughout the 8 weeks. So if you're somebody who likes to get hands-on and learn progressively, as opposed to intensively for 5 straight days, the online program might be better for you. And we do end up having an opportunity to pair you with a coach in ways that are quite unique to the online program, even if you don't have a explicit opportunity to meet in person. For anybody who is considering pursuing the Certificate of Business Excellence through the UC Berkeley Executive Education, the online program, the PM Studio, accounts for 4 credit equivalent days, whereas the in-person program accounts for 5 days. And you'll see at the bottom, the pricing is a little bit different for the 2 programs as well. Thank you for Ali for having shared a few of the links to each of the programs. So that is all we'd like to share. I know we're coming up to time here. We do want to offer an opportunity for y'all to ask any additional questions that we have not yet addressed. And so feel free to forward your questions to Jen, who will be happy to field any questions that y'all might have. Or forward any of the questions that are relevant to myself and Sarah for us to be able to answer them to the best of our ability as well. And just as a reminder, I know we've already answered these questions a couple of times through chat, but everyone who formally signed up for to join this very webinar will get a follow-up email about information for this PM Studio program, as well as a link to the recording of this session. So we hope that this was useful, informative, and at least a little bit fun. Thank you all for spending a full hour with us here from Berkeley, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions, you should feel free to maybe pop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them with a little bit of time that we have.
There is one question that Ali and Jen can answer about how long the credits are valid. I don't remember. From the time you start the COBE certificate, you have how long before you can finish it, Ali?
You have 3 years from the time you start your first program. Good question.
That's how long the credits will last. Looks like there aren't any remaining unanswered questions. So I'll add my gratitude to Vince's. Thank you for joining us. And I hope we'll see you again soon.